I think there were not many people who understood just how broad his interests were and how supportive he was of an astonishingly wide range of organisations.
The envelope had remained sealed through mourning, succession, and years of guarded silence. But when Catherine finally sat before Prince Philip's private representatives, the words inside did more than reveal an inheritance. They exposed a decision made beyond the reach of palace influence. Philip had entrusted his private fortune to the woman he believed could protect the crown's future, and not everyone inside the royal family was prepared to accept his final judgment. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Catherine did not speak when the dark leather folder was placed before her. Prince William watched her expression tighten as Philip's solicitor explained that the letter had been written by the Duke and protected until that moment. Windsor felt smaller. The room held only a dead man's final command. The solicitor opened the document and confirmed the truth plainly. She had inherited Philip's private fortune, including investments, possessions, family treasures, and assets held outside the Crown Estate. The Crown Estate, the property portfolio belonging to the reigning monarch officially, was separate from these holdings, which meant the king could not claim or redirect them. Catherine read the decisive paragraph twice. Her fingers tightened around the page as gratitude collided with disbelief, because this was not an honorary gift or a symbolic gesture. Philip had placed authority in her hands. William moved his chair closer and lowered his voice, telling her that the decision would reopen wounds the family had spent years hiding. He felt proud of his wife. Yet the future king understood what others would see. His grandfather had bypassed Charles, ignored the expected chain of control, and chosen Catherine alone. The letter became even more explosive in its final clauses. Philip ordered that no palace office, sovereign, or representative could interfere with her decisions. He praised her discipline, steadiness, and loyalty, writing that she understood duty without demanding applause. Catherine looked toward William, shaken by the faith behind those words, while he recognized the warning buried beneath them. Philip had not merely rewarded her, he had built protection around her. An aide entered before they could fully absorb the revelation. He quietly told William that King Charles had already requested a copy, and that another senior royal was demanding to know why the family had received no warning. The prince glanced at Catherine, and neither needed to say what had just begun. The fortune was extraordinary, but the deeper shock lay in Philip's choice of heir, and to understand why he chose Catherine, the palace would have to confront what each person stood to lose. For Catherine, the letter carried the weight of approval from a man who had never offered praise carelessly. For William, it felt like protection sent from beyond the grave. But for King Charles, the decision carried a far more complicated meaning. Philip had not merely rewarded a loyal granddaughter-in-law, he had placed his private legacy outside the king's control, forcing 3 members of one family to face 3 very different truths. Catherine carried that conflict back to Kensington Palace, where gratitude soon gave way to unease. She remembered entering royal life beneath relentless judgment, learning when to speak, when to endure, and how to support William without competing for the attention surrounding him. Philip had noticed. The late Duke, meaning the husband of the reigning queen during his lifetime, rarely praised anyone openly, but he had watched her absorb criticism without allowing it to poison her duty. William understood why that mattered. His grandfather had valued steadiness because the monarchy survived only when private hurt did not become public chaos. Charles faced a different wound. Alone in his study, he read the summary, removed his glasses, and placed them beside the document. He had spent decades seeking warmth and approval from Philip, yet his father's final financial confidence had gone elsewhere. The king understood the constitutional problem, but the son felt something sharper: rejection delivered after death, when no answer could be demanded and no misunderstanding could be repaired. Catherine told William she did not want the inheritance treated as a victory. She feared every protected property and heirloom would become evidence of rivalry. He listened, then returned to one troubling sentence: the assets must be guarded from temporary pressures and personal arrangements. The prince read it again. Philip had expected a struggle, and his warning suggested that someone inside the family might try to bend Catherine's authority. Camilla learned the details during a briefing recorded in the household's confidential minutes. Several residences and heirlooms she believed would remain available to the sovereign household. The staff and resources supporting the monarch now belonged under Catherine's control. The queen consort asked one question, then folded her hands and said nothing more. Her silence unsettled the officials because she understood at once that access, influence, and family memory had all shifted. William began searching for the reason behind such rigid protection. Catherine remembered one Windsor moment when Philip had watched her act while others hesitated. Charles knew the memory too, though he had never imagined it would shape his father's final decision. Philip's decision had not begun with money, rivalry, or succession. It had begun years earlier, during one private crisis that permanently changed how he saw Catherine. Long before the letter was opened, Prince Philip had already made his judgment. The turning point came during a winter gathering at Sandringham, when a private family dispute threatened to humiliate one of the youngest royals. Senior figures debated protocol, advisors guarded themselves, and the room froze beneath the pressure. Catherine alone crossed the distance between duty and compassion, and Philip never forgot what she did next. Philip had grown uneasy in his later years. Competing households were becoming courts, each defending influence while the discipline holding the family together weakened. Catherine possessed no formal authority over senior relatives, yet she repeatedly calmed disputes without demanding credit. That restraint mattered because the crown depended on unity, and every private rivalry threatened to become a public wound. Charlotte heard the argument before anyone noticed her. During a Christmas gathering at Sandringham, adults in the library began debating how soon Princess Charlotte should understand her future duties. The title princess marked her as a daughter of the future king, but it also carried expectations no child could grasp. Her breathing changed. Catherine ended the discussion, crossed to her daughter, and led her away. When Philip followed, she faced him and said no child should be forced to carry the family's fear. Philip summoned Catherine back to the library later that evening. He admitted that royal families often confused silence with courage, teaching children to hide pain until it hardened inside them. She answered that duty without protection eventually became cruelty. The Duke studied her for several seconds, then thanked her, not for comforting Charlotte, but for challenging the thinking that had frightened her. Catherine left shaken, unaware that the conversation had altered the future. William learned what happened through Catherine's private account after she returned to their rooms. He understood that his grandfather had witnessed a rare kind of courage. She had confronted power without creating spectacle. The prince held her hand and admitted that he had hesitated when she acted. That confession deepened the moment, because Philip had seen both her strength and the silence surrounding it. Philip made his move that same night. In a documented instruction preserved by his long-serving solicitor, he ordered a review of his personal holdings and requested a structure strong enough to resist palace pressure. He then began drafting the letter that would place his fortune in Catherine's care. Yet someone had watched part of that library exchange. That concealed witness later challenged Philip directly, and the family buried their confrontation for years. The choice had been born from Catherine's quiet act of protection, but when Philip's plan was challenged face to face, his answer became colder and more final than anyone expected. The challenge came behind a closed door, with no cameras, no courtiers, and no ceremonial smiles to soften the truth. Philip was asked why Catherine had been given influence over possessions tied to generations of family memory. He did not raise his voice. He did something more devastating. He leaned forward, named the failures he had witnessed, and made clear that his fortune would follow character, not rank, expectation, or wounded pride. Charles had requested the meeting after learning that his father was restructuring the fortune. He feared the arrangement would weaken the future sovereign's authority over family assets and create a private center of influence beyond the throne. The sovereign, the reigning monarch who formally leads the institution, could control crown property, but Philip insisted that personal wealth belonged to its owner. His decision, he said, would follow responsibility rather than succession. Philip waited until the door closed before speaking. Charles asked whether choosing Catherine reflected a lack of faith in him, and the older man slowly placed his pen on the desk. "This is not about affection," he said. "It is about judgment." The answer struck harder, because it came without anger. His son remained composed, yet the humiliation was unmistakable. He had spent years seeking approval, and now that approval had been given to someone else. Silence between them carried decades of unfinished pain. Charles challenged the comparison, but Philip refused to retreat. He praised Catherine for protecting Charlotte, when powerful adults had allowed argument to eclipse compassion. The Duke accused the wider family of treating loyalty as something to reward only when useful, then ignoring it when it demanded sacrifice. His son tightened his jaw. He understood that the inheritance had become a verdict on conduct, not merely a financial arrangement. Philip then named the danger. After his death, private objects could be pulled into rival households, traded for influence, or used to settle grievances hidden beneath ceremony. He feared memory itself would become a weapon. Catherine, he said, had acted when others hesitated, and that courage made her the only person he trusted to resist pressure without turning protection into revenge. Charles asked him to reconsider one clause. Philip looked directly at his son and refused. Not one word would change. Years later, the letter activated, and that buried exchange returned with brutal force. Charles now had to face Catherine himself, not as a wounded son confronting his father, but as a king confronting the woman his father had deliberately empowered. Philip had ended the first confrontation with a refusal, but his death ensured the second would carry even greater stakes, because Catherine now possessed the authority he had denied the future king. The palace had survived scandals, resignations, and ruptures by controlling the machinery behind the crown. But Philip had spent decades learning exactly how that machinery worked. His letter was not an impulsive farewell. It was protected by private trusts, independent executors, and instructions designed to survive royal pressure. When Charles asked what authority remained available to him, the answer arrived without ceremony. As king, he commanded the institution, but not his father's final private choice. Charles entered the briefing expecting options. Instead, the solicitor explained that Philip's wealth sat inside an independent trust, a legal arrangement placing assets under separate managers for a named beneficiary. That structure kept personal property apart from crown holdings and stopped the sovereign household from absorbing, delaying, or redistributing it. The king asked whether implementation could be paused. The solicitor answered no. He gripped the arm of his chair, then released it without speaking. Catherine faced a different pressure. The letter gave her authority over preservation, use, and eventual family transfer, while ordering her to protect the emotional and historical meaning of every item. She told William that she would never treat the fortune as a prize. The princess feared that one careless decision could make Philip's trust look like ambition, while the future king knew that refusing to act could invite the very interference his grandfather had anticipated. The second document deepened the danger. A sealed schedule, an official list attached to the main instructions, named private correspondence, investments, military mementos, and a residence linked to Philip's most personal memories. William paused when he reached the archive clause. Catherine alone could decide which relatives saw those papers. That power mattered because private letters could reshape old loyalties, expose hidden pain, and change how the family remembered the man who had held them together. Catherine closed the schedule and said access would never be traded for peace. William supported her, but he warned that the first request would test more than ownership. It would reveal whether the family respected Philip's boundary once that boundary became inconvenient. The test arrived before either could prepare. Camilla contacted Catherine through a documented private request concerning one of the listed properties. The Queen Consort described it as a matter of continuity, yet the timing carried unmistakable pressure. Catherine read the message twice, while William watched her understand what came next. Camilla's appeal was personal, but its consequences were institutional. Granting it could weaken every restriction, while denying it could turn a quiet inheritance into an open conflict inside the monarchy. The documents had made Catherine's authority unbreakable on paper, but its real strength would be measured by the first royal who asked her to bend it. The first request arrived before the palace had even agreed how to acknowledge the inheritance. Camilla wanted continued access to a private country property included in Philip's estate, arguing that it had long served the family during difficult periods. Catherine listened without interruption. Yet when the Queen finished speaking, the room remained painfully still. Philip's instructions were clear, and Catherine now faced the decision he had prepared her to make. Camilla framed the request as continuity, not resistance. She asked Catherine to keep the residence available to the monarch's household, meaning the staff, offices, and private arrangements supporting the reigning sovereign. For years, the property had offered privacy during family strain, and losing it would alter more than travel plans. It would signal that Philip's inheritance had created a boundary the king's circle could no longer cross. Catherine knew the restriction left little room. Philip had designated the house as a protected retreat for William, his wife, and their children, with access controlled by her alone. Sitting opposite Camilla without aids, she heard the Queen explain that exclusion felt deliberate, almost personal. The older woman had believed the place remained part of a shared royal life. Now she felt that life closing around her. Catherine chose every word carefully. She acknowledged Camilla's disappointment, but said comfort could not justify rewriting Philip's wishes. Her refusal carried no triumph, only resolve. The princess understood that yielding once could weaken every safeguard attached to the fortune. Camilla understood it too. The warning came quietly. Before leaving, Camilla said the inheritance would be presented as Catherine building a court within the court, a rival center of loyalty operating beside the sovereign. She closed the door softly, and that restraint felt more dangerous than anger. Consequences followed immediately. Household officials separated records, keys, and financial duties. One long-serving staff member received written instructions to report directly to Catherine rather than the king's office. The change mattered because daily authority was now moving, not merely symbolic ownership. Charles confronted that reality over breakfast. He read the revised access list, stopped halfway, and pushed the document across the table without touching his food. Camilla watched him realize that Philip's final decision was already reshaping palace life. Neither spoke William's name, but both knew the next move belonged to him. William could defend Catherine and risk widening the break with Charles, or urge compromise and betray the purpose of Philip's protection. For the future king, peace now demanded a side. Before pressure spread, the refusal turned a private inheritance into a visible division, and the next choice belonged to William, the man caught between his wife, his father, and Philip's final command. William had spent his life learning how to stand between competing loyalties without appearing to choose. This time, neutrality was no longer possible. Behind a closed door at Kensington Palace, Catherine admitted that the inheritance had begun to feel less like Philip's blessing and more like a weapon pointed at their family. William listened, took her hand, and made the decision that transformed the crisis from a royal dispute into a shared act of purpose. Catherine had endured days of legal briefings, guarded calls, and conversations in which every polite word concealed a judgment. She feared that protecting the fortune would be called ambition, while surrendering it would betray the man who had trusted her. William faced an equally painful choice. Supporting his wife could deepen the break with Charles, yet asking her to compromise would damage both Philip's instructions and the marriage built on their private loyalty. Catherine finally said what she had been afraid to admit. Alone with no aides present, she told William she would surrender everything if it could restore peace. Her voice broke when she said she had never wanted Philip's death to divide the family. The prince tightened his hand around hers and refused. His grandfather had not chosen her because she desired power, he said. He had chosen her because she could hold it without allowing it to change her. William then offered a path neither side had expected. They could place a defined portion of the fortune into a private family foundation, an independently managed fund created to support chosen causes. It would assist military families, children facing bereavement, and organizations connected to Philip's lifetime of service. Catherine understood the power of the idea at once. The intimate letters, heirlooms, and properties would remain protected, while the broader wealth would become service rather than display. Resolve replaced fear. Catherine agreed, not as a retreat, but as proof that inheritance did not have to become possession. William carried the proposal to Charles and met him privately. He told his father that he supported his wife completely and would not ask her to weaken Philip's boundaries. Then he placed the foundation plan before the king, showing that reconciliation remained possible without overturning the decision. Charles read in silence. Before he could answer, an aide entered with urgent news. Details of the letter had reached the press. The private argument was no longer private. Outside the room, phones were ringing, and the first headline was being prepared before the family could unite. William's choice restored Catherine's resolve, but the palace lost control of the story that same evening, and by morning, Philip's private judgment belonged to the entire world. By sunrise, the letter was no longer a family secret. It was a national reckoning. Broadcasters interrupted their schedules, palace correspondents crowded the gates, and millions debated why Prince Philip had placed his private fortune in Catherine's hands. Yet amid the noise, one image captured the public mood more powerfully than any headline. Catherine arriving for duty without celebration, carrying the burden of inheritance as though it were another promise she had to keep. Catherine refused to disappear. William offered to cancel her visit to a children's bereavement center, but she told him that absence would make Philip's trust appear shameful. The center supported young people grieving a parent, which made the engagement painfully fitting. She was carrying a dead man's confidence while helping children carry their own loss. The prince remained close, knowing every gesture would now be read as either defiance or surrender. Buckingham Palace responded with restraint. Its statement, called the inheritance a private family arrangement, and emphasized respect for Philip's documented wishes. Buckingham Palace, the monarch's main administrative headquarters, normally controlled official royal messaging, yet this time, its careful words could not contain the public meaning. News organizations called the decision the Duke's final vote of confidence in Catherine, and a dramatic shift in the monarchy's internal balance. Charles watched the coverage alone. When a commentator described the letter as Philip's final judgment on royal character, the king turned off the television and remained seated in silence. He understood why the phrase hurt public sympathy was turning Catherine's inheritance into a measure of worth, while his private grief was being treated as resistance. The defining front page arrived before noon. A major London newspaper placed Philip's portrait beside Catherine's, beneath the words, "His final trust." Outside Kensington Palace, a crowd gathered with flowers and handwritten notes praising duty over birthright. The princess completed her engagement without celebration, and William watched the public respond not to wealth, but to restraint. That evening, a veteran royal correspondent said during a televised special that the inheritance was not a transfer of luxury, but a transfer of confidence. The line spread across social media and international broadcasts. Pressure closed around Charles. He could embrace the decision or allow the family divide to become Philip's final public legacy. Charles summoned William and Catherine to Windsor. His message was brief, but its meaning was absolute. The king was ready to deliver his verdict. Neither Catherine nor William knew whether the summons promised acceptance, confrontation, or a rupture. The public had already decided that Philip's fortune represented trust, but only one final conversation could determine whether that trust would heal the monarchy or leave a permanent scar. The final meeting did not begin with anger. It began with Philip's letter resting between Charles, William, and Catherine like a fourth presence in the room. No advisor spoke for them. No official statement softened what had happened. A father had made his choice, a son had been wounded by it, and a future queen had inherited its burden. What followed finally revealed that Philip's fortune had never truly been about wealth. Charles received William and Catherine at Windsor, where Philip had once defended his decision. The king demanded privacy. No aides or legal representatives would enter. A royal archive, the protected collection preserving family documents, might claim the letter later, but first the three of them had to face what it had done. Catherine spoke without triumph. She promised to preserve Philip's papers, protect the possessions reserved for the younger generation, and use much of the inherited wealth to establish the service foundation. William supported every word. The prince knew the plan mattered, because it turned private fortune into public purpose, without surrendering the boundaries his grandfather had created. Charles finally admitted the wound. He said the letter had revived a fear carried since youth, that his father recognized strength in others more easily than in his son. The monarch did not accuse Catherine, yet his voice exposed decades of pain. She answered with compassion, telling him Philip's faith in her was not a verdict against him. The Duke had placed different burdens on different people, and hers was to stop his legacy becoming another weapon. Catherine read the final paragraph aloud. Philip had written that wealth survived only when converted into duty, and that she must use his inheritance to bind future generations rather than divide the present one. Silence followed. William watched his father place one hand over the page. Charles accepted the decision. He promised public support for the inheritance and foundation, refusing to let pain harden into resentment. Then he returned the letter to Catherine instead of keeping it for the archive. "He left it in your care," the king said. "That is where it belongs." The foundation rose in Philip's name. The private property remained protected, while family access to the archive was granted without weakening Catherine's authority. His fortune had not crowned her with greater status. It had confirmed the character he had already recognized. And with Charles's acceptance, William's loyalty, and Catherine's promise fulfilled, Philip's final letter ceased to be a source of division and became what he had intended from the beginning. A completed act of trust that secured his legacy and strengthened the crown he had served. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.